Welcome back to Founder Edit. They say you can't have it all, but Crystal Lee is living proof you can. She's the definition of beauty and brains, a Stanford grad with a master's in communication, co-founder of the Silicon Valley startup LifeSite, and a tech visionary reshaping how we live online. Before she was a Silicon Valley powerhouse, she conquered the pageant world, Miss California, Miss Chinatown USA, and first runner-up at Miss America. Fun fact, she was also one of the announcers for the Golden State Warriors. This is Crystal Lee. She's one of my good friends, and I got a chance to sit down with her to pick her brains on how you can be a successful founder.
I had a very toxic mindset around what I had to be to play founder. I felt like I needed to be first in the office and last out. I realized halfway through that journey, and I actually had shared this with some of my colleagues at LifeSite, they were like, it shouldn't be about optics, it should be about impact.
What were some of the challenges you face as a co-founder?
I think the biggest challenge is like, you have a limited amount of investment or a limited amount of dollars. You have to be judicious about how you spend that. When you're inexperienced, you don't really know what the best use of the cash is. The challenge is like, how do you get through those challenges and still feel like you want to wake up the next day and do it all over again?
What were some things that you learned that, like some misconceptions maybe that you want to clear up? Like I've learned, for instance, that just because you have a C-suite title doesn't mean you know what you're doing.
What even is the role of the ivory tower that is higher education? Are they relevant?
Do you maybe foresee any upcoming trends that is going to impact the media because of AI?
Yes. My prediction is that we're actually going to enter a new era where things like handwritten notes are going to come back. Things like emails with like little misspellings are going to be accepted. And things like, legislators who don't have like a super polished way of speaking are going to be elected.
You want to get started with generating AI images and videos, but there's so many tools, models, and how in the world do you get prompts to work? It's confusing and honestly kind of frustrating, especially with hundreds of different tools out there. That's why we made this Influencer Studio, just like ChatGPT, but for AI visuals. Okay, and you might ask, doesn't ChatGPT already have image generation? Well, I'm glad you asked, because Influencer Studio is 10 times more powerful. Take a look at what we can do. Let's test it out. Generate a widescreen photo of a Latina singer on stage at a concert. Look how realistic this is compared to what you usually get from ChatGPT. Don't like something? Tell it. It'll fix it. Now let's make her an Asian singer. Okay, let's change her face to mine. Now let's turn this into a video where she's singing. You see, guys, it's that simple, and the AI knows exactly what you're trying to do. No fancy setup, no prompt engineering, just simple chat. And you don't need to be an AI expert to create something amazing. Try it yourself. It's kind of magic.
This isn't like a bad piece of advice, but I do remember Rose Chung once, we were Ubering together, and she asked me what I wanted to do, and I was like, well, I kind of like TV presenting. I had no idea what I wanted to do in TV presenting. I just kind of said it, and I was like, but I really like comedians. I like people that go out there and make others laugh. And she said to me, "Oh, Louie, I don't think you're very funny though."
That is so savage. Yeah. And also so indicative of that kind of feedback from that community where we grew up.
Right.
Yeah. Super judgy, very quick to just say what comes to mind without any idea or thought about how it'll land.
Is she wrong though? Absolutely not. I wasn't funny back then. I've never honed it. I've never taken an improv class or learned about comedy writing, but that conversation that we had in the car that day made me want to go out and learn improv and take a couple of classes here and there about how to, act or at least write funnier. And so I kind of have to thank her for giving me that piece of advice because nobody has ever said that to me before.
Right. And please don't use what I said about her being judgy because we love Rose and she's going to watch this be like, I had Crystal.
I love Rose too. I don't think she's our audience.
Okay.
So, Crystal, you have nothing to worry. Guys, Emily here. I am so excited to be sitting next to my friend Crystal Lee. She's inspired me in so many ways that you probably don't even know. But I think that's the whole point of the conversations that I have with people is like through having these conversations, you can learn so much and get inspired by people around you. So Crystal is one of the co-founders of LifeSite. But before we get into that, we gotta like butter her up a little bit. Like you gotta ease her into the tricky questions.
I'm your toast.
Like, I don't want to say like, oh, what was your childhood like? But, in a sense, what was this journey like for you to go from, that little girl who studied ballet, Crystal dances professionally, by the way, to going to Stanford and then doing pageants and then becoming, this very fierce female in tech?
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. Consider me buttered. I come from a family of entrepreneurs. My grandfather was an entrepreneur. My father was an entrepreneur. And I just always felt like one of the biggest gifts being born as an American citizen is to be able to build off of those values that are ingrained in our society. That if there's a dream, you go out there and you work for it and you make it happen. It's not every country and every place in this world where you have those opportunities. But in the United States, there is a very strong culture around entrepreneurship, starting businesses. And my grandfather was an entrepreneur not by choice, but because he was an immigrant. Very few people were going to give him a job because he didn't have an education.
Oh, what was that today?
Solicitors.
Oh, no.
I feel bad. They're like young guys trying to clean my windows. I'm like,
Sorry, but your grandfather.
My grandfather, yeah, okay. My grandfather was an immigrant from China. He came here at a very young age. He did not have an easy time finding a job, so he created his own luck. And that's why he started several businesses. At one point, he was a butcher. At one point, he was a butcher. He, I think, had a shoe store. He had a lot of different things. But before he passed, he ended up building a modest real estate portfolio in San Francisco. So he was very successful.
Wow. I mean, I have so many questions that just pop into my head, but we're here to talk about you. But like, wow, there must be so much to unpack there because being an immigrant way back then is very different than being an immigrant today. But okay, so your grandfather kind of like paved the way, I guess, and then your dad was an entrepreneur in his own right, I guess?
Yes. My father decided to become an entrepreneur because he saw what his older brothers created. He saw how hard his father worked, and he just always saw himself as being someone who wanted to be self-employed so that he could create his own schedule. The hard thing when you create your own business is it's so many more hours than the typical 40-hour week, 9 to 6, benefits provided. You don't really clock in, clock out, and then take the cash and don't worry. It's you get more out of it, but you also have to put more into it.
Right.
So my parents worked a lot when I was little. The good thing that I remember is whenever I was sick from school, my father was always there to pick me up. Didn't matter what time of day, didn't matter like if it was last minute, my dad was always there to pick me up.
That's really wholesome. So you growing up, you must have watched your parents work and you saw what it's like to have, I guess, an entrepreneurial spirit. And when you were young, did you know in those moments that that's what you wanted to do, or did you have other aspirations?
When I was little, I had no idea what I wanted to do. In fact, I still don't know what I want to do. It's interesting. We reached this point where in adulthood where you have this brand and you have this story. And when I'm applying for jobs, people are always asking me, who are you? Tell me your story. And just by virtue of the fact that you're a young adult, yes, you have all that history. So you should have a story or a cohesive story. I think there's a lot of unfair emphasis on needing it to be a cohesive story because we're all just trying to figure it out. I am a post producer and a director of post right now, but in 5, 6, 10, 12, 30 years, I might be doing something completely different.
Right.
So it's okay to, constantly be reinventing yourself, because I think that our generation is the first in human history to have easily 3, 4, 5 different careers by the time we retire, if we even retire.
100%. I don't know how you feel about retirement, but I kind of don't want to ever.
I think retirement is like a state of mind.
Yeah.
I might still be working, but I might be like, coming in at the board of some PTA, like
Right.
bringing some donuts.
Right.
I might teach some classes on how to garden.
Yeah.
Do volunteers ever retire if they keep volunteering?
Mhm.
I don't know.
I think I'm always going to need something for my brain to do.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. Because you and I are cut from the same cloth. Like, we need a certain baseline amount of intellectual stimulation to feel like ourselves. And that's been really hard as a new mom, because I love my kids, but your kids can't talk. So how am I going to take care of this entity whom I love so much, but also like can't talk to me,
Right.
and like doesn't understand any of the podcasts that I enjoy listening to? I can only sing Old MacDonald so many times before I feel like I breathe.
Right. I do want to circle back to your current job where you said you work in production and post-production. But I think I want to ask it a little bit later, because I think chronologically, I think we have to talk about you being a co-founder first and everything. But I really want to touch upon that because, I also work in AI, and eventually towards the end of the conversation, I do want to hear your thoughts on like this AI stuff and how we just have so much AI produced content. But okay, I guess your grandparents, your parents, maybe passed on that like entrepreneurial gene to you. And I remember shortly after you graduated from Stanford, you, like many of the other Silicon Valley like yuppies, you became a co-founder. What was that transition like? Because you were like fresh out of college.
Yes. My first job out of college, I worked in sales at Google. I was there for a few years, and then I realized it was my time to take more risks. I saw people all around me starting companies. It was the heyday in Silicon Valley where everything was being funded. There was so much money and hope and investment just in that ecosystem in the San Francisco Bay Area in the early 2010s.
I remember I would hop into an Uber and the Uber driver would show me an app that they were designing. It was contagious.
Exactly. It was this feeling that anything was possible. And I met my co-founders, Chris Wong and Yoon, and we hit it off, and we decided to create LifeSite, which at the time was software that allowed for financial advisors to help manage sensitive information with their clients. Cloud storage, cloud solutions at that time were really starting to hit it up, were really starting to take off. And LifeSite was branded as something that was specifically for financial advisors. Since then, it has iterated and become a data security solution for lots of different businesses. And I was there for a few years. I learned so much. And then I felt the call to come back into media, and I had to pursue it. So I ended up moving to LA, and that's where I ended up presenting and hosting and producing. And that's what brought me here to being the director of production, post-production.
What were some of the challenges you faced as a co-founder?
I think when you co-found something, when you start a company from scratch, especially as a young person, you don't know what you don't know. And there are a lot of stakeholders that you're trying to manage. You're managing your board. You're managing your co-founders. You're managing your customers. You're managing your employees. And you're managing like your sense of self through all of that. I actually felt very grateful for the co-founders that I had because they had more professional experience than I did. And they took on a lot of the burden of what I didn't know at the time. I was responsible for a lot of customer success. I helped with hiring. I helped with communications, speaking with customers. But I think the biggest challenge is like, you have a limited amount of investment or limited amount of dollars. You have to be judicious about how you spend that. You can either take a pile of cash and either hire someone. You can take that to acquire customers. You can take that to as employee referral bonuses for new customers. I mean, there's so many ways that you can use that money. When you're inexperienced, you don't really know what the best use of that cash is. So the challenge is like, how do you get through those challenges and still feel like you want to wake up the next day and do it all over again?
Yeah.
Because making mistakes is also inevitable.
I have a question that comes off so easy, but I'm sure there is no straightforward answer to this. What does it take to be a co-founder or a CEO? I know some people use it interchangeably. It's not always the case. Sometimes CEOs are hired and they don't have anything to do with the founding partners. But in your opinion, to be those like top level executives, what are some basic qualities that everyone has to have?
Yeah, good question. I think it depends on the size of the company. You can be the CEO of a small business that has 3 employees and still have the same types of pressures as a Fortune 500 CEO. It's just that the way that you spend your time is going to be different. And the amount of time that you're in the trenches, so to speak, is going to be different. For a smaller company, CEOs have to be willing to do it all and they have to know how to do it all.
Mm-hmm.
For larger companies, CEOs need to know how to manage boards and they need to know how things work, especially for public companies. They need to know that about what they need to do to keep quarterly earnings call positive. Yeah. Ultimately, the one thing that both CEOs have to have in common is I think they have to have some sort of work-life balance in a way where when they show up for work, they are like the best version of themselves because they oftentimes have to check themselves at the door when they're at work. They are leaders. They are there showing up as managers and as bosses for people who look up to them. And Fortune 500 CEOs are paid as such because they typically have a lot riding on those decisions. And the selection process is, quite competitive, right, to get there. And you need all the degrees and the networks and, all that stuff. But even if you're a hustler and you have just one contractor, but you yourself are the core entrepreneur, I think you still have to do what you need to be whole, healthy, that's physically, emotionally, spiritually, so that when you come into work, you're delivering your very best to your customers, your stakeholders.
Are you happier now as a mom working in an industry that you like or back when you were a co-founder?
Oh, I'm so much happier now. And I feel like I'm a better manager now than I'm a mother. Okay. I think without a doubt. I think when I was young, I didn't have kids. I had a very toxic mindset around what I had to be to play founder.
Mm.
I felt like I needed to be first in the office and last out. Have you heard of this? It's like first in, last out.
Or, yeah, that's what they teach you.
And I think I realized halfway through that journey, and I actually had shared this with some of my colleagues at LifeSite, I got called out for it. They were like, it shouldn't be about optics. It should be about impact. And it shouldn't be necessarily about pure amount of time spent. It should be what you got done and how productive you are. And since that experience, it has absolutely changed me because as a manager now, I oversee my department with a strong eye towards deliverables and not so much has your computer been moving for 8 hours? Has your mouse been moving for 8 hours? Because I teach remote. We don't have any of that logging software, but that even if we did, that wouldn't matter to me. I feel like the key is how efficient can you be with your time? And most importantly, people work to live. They don't live to work, or they shouldn't live to work. There is, however, the other perspective that the more the US starts to get more relaxed, the more European you get, the more like, oh, people are just off to vacation for, 3 weeks, 3 months in the summer, right? Americans don't really have that. There's a much more like strong emphasis on work ethic. Maybe it's our puritanical values from when our country was founded. I don't know. But I think it's a balance, right? Like you really want to encourage and inspire people to hit it hard, and you want to hire the very best, most productive person for that salary, for that money. But you also need to remember that to keep people happy, you need to see them as 360-degree human beings.
Right.
They're not just employees. They are fathers. They are mothers. They are caretakers. They are aunts, uncles, their spouses, and all those other relationships also take time. So after 40 hours a week, how much time is left?
100%. For any aspiring young CEOs or founders who might be watching this, I imagine that a lot of people, when they first start out, they probably don't know what they're doing. They don't necessarily have those deliverables that you're talking about, because it's very clear in the media, right? Like if you're Mr. Beast, you want to hit 2,000 videos a year.
Mm-hmm.
You want every one of them to reach like millions of views. But when you're working at a smaller company and you're at the helm of that, what would you say are good metrics to keep in the back of your head?
I think it depends on the business that you're in, right? Like someone who owns an ice cream shop is going to have very different metrics than someone who is managing video editors, right? Like an ice cream shop entrepreneur might say, I want you to generate 5-star reviews at the end of every shift. That's very different from you saying, hey, editor, I want to go through less than 2 notes, 2 passes, 2 rounds of revision for every 10 videos, right? Like, which is actually pretty difficult if you're letting your interviewee review the cut. So yeah, I think it just totally depends. I would say when you're evaluating success, you want it to be as measurable as possible.
Right.
And also because employment laws in this country, if you're going to let anyone go, you really need to be documenting why. I think the rules may be different for anything beyond a small business, but as a manager, you want to make sure that you're following the rules.
Do you think there's a sweet spot in how many people you're managing? Like if you were the CEO, like what do you think is a sweet spot of like, this is how many employees I want to be the boss of, and this is how many people it takes to form a viable company?
You're obviously going to want to hire as few people as possible to get the job done well.
Yeah.
That's the only way you're going to be profitable. That being said, if you're talking about a lifestyle business, maybe, or a nonprofit, right? Like maybe you're optimizing around work with people who you like.
Yeah.
But if you're looking to hire, if you're looking for outside investment and you are on the time and you were on a treadmill to either sell the company or to return cash to your early investors, then I think you just have to answer that for yourself based on your industry and what's happening in it. Please let me know if I'm not answering your question, by the way. Sometimes I go
No.
So just feel free to bring me back.
I actually think you're giving very, very, very solid answers. Because I don't know if there's a sweet spot. I don't know if it's like the best number is just, manage a party of 8 or being like a CEO of, a 200 employee company. I don't know. I would imagine like you get a loftier title and like a more cushy paycheck if you're working for a, top 500 company, but working with smaller companies and with your friends, I think it gives you a higher happiness factor. But I don't know because I'm not really a CEO.
Yeah. I mean, you could have higher happiness factor as long as the dynamics and the culture of the company are fit. At the end of the day, like culture, I used to think it was just this like amorphous concept, like culture. Oh, we have good culture, a culture fit. But having worked at 4 or 5 different companies at this point, it is a very real thing. How people behave in the absence of the manager in the room, it definitely makes a big difference.
I love that you mentioned culture because this is something that all founders have to establish at the very beginning, and not lose sight of. So in our post-COVID era, how do we establish culture when lots of people may be working remote?
That's a great question. This question is something that stumps a lot of HR and people teams all over the world.
Yeah.
I think culture is set from the top. I think having managers do things like take vacations is one way to set culture because they, in an unspoken fashion, give permission to the rest of their org that it's okay to take time off. If there is enough of a fund for everyone to have, DoorDash for one night and everyone gets on a Zoom and like eats dinner together.
Yeah.
That's the example of building culture remotely. I also think there's no replacement for getting people together in person at least once a year.
Same. Okay, let's see. We talked about you mentioned that you worked for multiple different companies. Like, so you've been at the executive level. I'm sure you've also like been under some people. Maybe you're a fan of, maybe you weren't. But I guess like given your like bountiful work experience, what were some things that you learned that like some misconceptions maybe that you want to clear up? Like I've learned, for instance, that just because you have a C-suite title doesn't mean you know what you're doing. Lots of companies have COOs and they don't really do anything. So please help us clear some misconceptions.
Yeah. Some thinking misconceptions. I will say one misconception is that just because you went to a great school means that you're a great hire. And that is not always the case because the skills it takes to know how to play the game in college admissions is not necessarily the same type of is not necessarily the same type of skill that it takes to be a key employee in a growing industry and new business, for example. Sometimes, to give you an example, sometimes someone like an Ivy League school is going to want structure. They're going to want to know the rules of the game in order for them to be able to strategically play said game. In startups, in new industries, there are no rules. And managers are looking for smart young people to create said rules and to create structure and to go get work done and to make impact without having the blueprint presented for them.
Yeah. I love your answer so much. I don't know why it excited me so much. I think it's like, I can't wait to take this back to my parents. Be like, hey guys, I didn't make it to an Ivy League.
Yeah. But you went to a good school though. UC Davis is a good school.
Oh, I call it the Harvard of Davis.
Harvard. It's a good school.
It's a pretty good school, but again, too much structure. And I don't think it prepared me for the entrepreneurial world where, you're not going to be expected to color between lines, right?
Yeah.
With that said though, have you heard about Cluey and the CEO, Roy Lee? I'm curious if you had any opinions.
No, what happened?
So it's a really famous tech story, but he got kicked out of Columbia because he was creating the software that apparently helps people cheat during interviews and whatnot. But his blueprint just blows your mind because he would hire a bunch of interns. Well, first of all, when he got kicked out of Columbia, he like doubled down on it. Okay. He was like, guys, this is a thing that happened to me. I got kicked out and it like, he was like aura farming off the fact that he got kicked out. But then he continued pushing Cluey out and would hire, like 40 interns or something. And everyone has to crank out a ton of TikToks per day. So you would have like 200 TikToks about Cluey every single day. And that's just something that wasn't really done before.
Yeah. I actually think that's a really great example.
It's genius.
Just doing things your way. He was obviously smart enough to get into Columbia, but he ticked them off. And so he was like, I don't even need you guys.
Yeah.
And post-COVID, what even is the role of the ivory tower that is higher education? Like, are they relevant?
Right. Well, you went to a big school. Both you and your sister did. So I feel like if anyone is fit to answer that question, it's you, because you're now raising two very young kids and the landscape's going to be completely different when your kids have to go to college. So what, to any aspiring young parents right now, and they're raising their kids, do you have any words of advice to raise the best possible child in this day and age?
I think every parent has to look at their own past and their own relationship with their parents and to look at the data from how they grew up and pick and choose what worked for them and what didn't, while also customizing the parenting plan to what your child's personality and capabilities and potential is. it's not a one size fits all. What my mom did with me was not the same as what my mom did with my sister. Even though she was the same person, we grew up with the same environment, my mom tailored what she did differently from me and my sister because we had 3 personalities.
Right.
I want my children to have the option to do whatever they want, but ultimately they will show me who they are. And as a reaction to how I was raised by Tiger Mom, I'm probably going to be pretty flexible and to make sure that they have time for all of the things that are unique to childhood. I barely had a chance to have that much fun as a kid. And my mom, to this day probably says, well, it worked, didn't it? You got into Stanford.
Yeah.
And, my mom is not a American hick, but that's kind of like the vibe that she always. So love my mom. She did a great job. I think my role moving forward as I raise my children is to just support and not necessarily impose or push too far.
Crystal, it's so refreshing to talk to you. I feel like you're one of the few and rare people in the world where I feel like I can just talk for days and we would still not be done talking. I do want to wrap up this interview soon because she is a mommy of 2.
You hear my daughter coming earlier. My husband was like, oh, okay.
I just feel more bad for your husband and your daughter. Like, I don't like taking you away from them. So, before we wrap though, I think there's 2 topics I really want to hear from you. And the first one is, what does it take to be a successful female entrepreneur? I know it's like kind of cringe to put female in front of certain labels, but like as a girl, it really does make a difference because I've been told by my boss, at certain moments, like not to talk. And then I think to myself, okay, well, if I was a guy, would he have told me that? Right. So the dynamics are very, very delicate. So, I really do want to hear from you. Like, what are your tips to an aspiring female entrepreneur? What do they have to learn to be able to like properly, seduce their investors?
Right.
In a non-seductive way.
Right. Oh, I mean, you're asking me what it takes to be a successful female entrepreneur. And I want to ask you the same question because that I'm not one. Like I wish I could crack the code. I would say when you're a woman in today's world, it's not effective to just act like a white guy. Because if you do act like the white guy, people are going to be like, what? Even though you're doing everything the same, it's going to break people's brains.
Right.
And it can cause you to be a little less likable. If you are ostentatious and very loud and make promises that you can't keep, but you're not golfing, you're not doing the beer thing, it's just, you can't talk sports. Like, I gotta start this answer from the beginning because I feel like I'm going down a path and I can't pull it back. Can I start from the beginning?
Yeah, go for it. Even though I kind of like this path that you're taking.
I'm not going to deviate from it. I'm going to start again from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, Emily, you're asking me what it takes to be a female successful entrepreneur. And I wish I knew. A lot of people out there are trying to crack this code, and we're trying to be competitive with other candidates out there, especially if they are men and they have certain tools that we don't have at our disposal. For example, I see my husband all the time networking while golfing, and I'm sorry, but I hate golf, and I'm looking for someone to go get their nails done with me. But most of today's investors are not women who want to get their nails done with me. So we have to somehow walk this fine line of being both approachable and predictable enough to be comfortable for investors to feel like they have us figured out, because sometimes that makes us more likable, right? People are like, oh, I have her pegged. Oh, she smiles a lot. Oh, that's the worst thing. Remember downtown San Francisco, if people randomly smile, you ever get that? Like right off the street? And I know that that's coming from a place of harassment, first of all, but it's because women are held to the standard of like needing to be a certain way in order to be pleasant, in order to be likable. I wish it were as easy as starting to act like a guy and make that a statement and make that normalized. If enough women did that collectively, I think it would be normalized. But the truth is, if you just suddenly start acting like a dude, it's not going to work. Because not enough women are suddenly, all of a sudden, acting like dudes in order for that to work.
Right.
Everyone would have to suddenly be doing that. So what I have found is you have to be enough of a woman to be likable, but also you have to think like a man to be willing to take risks and to know when is the right time to not act like a likable person. It's not going to be for everything. It's like you have to pick and choose when that timing is. And it's going to be different for everyone.
Right. Yeah. Some of the most successful women entrepreneurs on the internet right now are OnlyFans creators.
Yeah.
And whenever I see them on the media or on my timeline, I don't know about anyone else, but my first impression is, wow, this girl, like she made it, because so many people try to do that and not everyone makes it. But the bigger they get, the more toxicity they receive from, from everyone. And I just think to myself, well, gosh, like girls just can't win because when a guy does that or like, I can't call anyone out, but
Here's the thing though, right? You're right. Some of these OnlyFans creators and women sometimes are on the receiving end of all this toxicity, but the winner is still the creator because in the media economy, all comments, all engagement is good.
I agree.
Ultimately, the OnlyFans that's hosting all these people hating on her, she's the one receiving ad revenue to her YouTube channel. So joke's on you, hater. You're paying for this lady's Starbucks.
Yeah. I agree. I don't know why they're like vilified for doing what they do because when a male entrepreneur capitalizes on the lust or fetishes of other people, like Hugh Hefner, for instance, like he's revered and becomes legendary. I don't know.
Double standard.
I think the double standard is, it's very icky to me. But
yeah. Women are held to an impossible standard sometimes because we're not only judged by men and women, we judge ourselves so harshly. Like I think oftentimes both men and women do deal with confidence issues, but I think women have so much emotional intelligence around their own perception, among like their peer group, but also we put so much pressure on ourselves. So much. And it's because we have to, like we're raised a certain way to present ourselves and to show up in the world in order to be a likable woman. A lot of men don't have to do that. This is just across fair, but there's also benefits to it too. Like women have more tools in our arsenal to show the world who we are. I sometimes will hear I'll hear my husband out, and I don't want to out him for this, but he's told me stories before where he's like, women can like, there's so much more clothing options.
that is true.
There's so much more like accessory options for us. There's so many, and he's right. Like there are a lot of options for us when it comes to that. But then I should have just flung it right back in his face and said, well, you have a lot of sports things that you could do, like bowling, pool, golf, gym, Not that women can't do it, but like men's sports is so much more lucrative than women's sports. If I have a son and a daughter, my son has options of D1 athletics that can turn into a career. Unless my daughter wants to do beach volleyball or soccer, she's not going to be an athlete, or maybe golf or tennis. Those are the only main like sports for women where I think there's really a chance. For men, 2x, 3x those options in terms of profession.
For any young girls watching this right now, do you have any tools in, I guess, like the digital arsenal that you would suggest to people? Because right now we have so many resources. We have ChatGPT, all forms of AI really, and social media. Do you have any resources that you would recommend young women listening to this right now? Like, if you don't know where to start, like this is what you can do.
I think you should just constantly be learning and constantly be developing your skills. one of the best things about being young is your ability to learn quickly. And as you get older, your ability to learn starts to go down because your brain just isn't as plastic. Like the neuroplasticity goes down. So strike while the iron is hot. And while your eyes are still good, to look at your phone for 6 hours and not get a headache. Like I'm approaching my mid-30s and I am just not as fast as I used to be. So that's my biggest advice is like, remember when you're young, that's when you learn things quickly. You can always learn later in life too when you have a bit more time, but just the sheer amounts of information that you can process when you're young is just like, because your brain is,
Oh, I feel it. The last question that I have, and this is very relevant to your work today, but you work in production in the media. And as of right now, so many massive companies like Netflix, for instance, is implementing more AI. Do you maybe foresee any upcoming trends that is going to impact the media because of AI?
Yes. I believe we're entering an era where AI is becoming more and more recognizable. And when someone sees anything shocking or unusual, they're like, this is AI, right? So I think my prediction is that we're actually going to enter a new era where things like handwritten notes are going to come back. Things like emails with like little misspellings are going to be accepted. And things like, legislators who don't have like a super polished way of speaking are going to be elected. Because we're looking for that like genuine, kind of rough around the edges indications that it's real. Everything online now is fake. So I think people are hungry for something that's real, even though AI is becoming so sophisticated that it's starting to hide. AI is becoming so sophisticated, it's starting to become hard to stop.
Right.
But I actually started a YouTube channel a couple of years ago. It was more of an experiment. It was in the pageant world. It was called Crystal Clues. And during the pandemic, I just experimented with putting video after video after video after video out. And since then, I've had children and I haven't had time to nurture the channel. I will get back to it at some point. I think I'm glad that I did it at that time because it was before the advent of AI. And I'm really proud of the fact that all of that content was made from scratch. I didn't prompt anything to generate a thumbnail.
Right.
I did it in Photoshop and in Canva, and all of like my presenting work. Same with you, actually. You and I came of age presenting right before AI. Now there are a lot of AI presenters that are coming after our job,
And I hate them.
we're gonna kill them.
They are actually so proud, and they call themselves AI clones in their description. It comes from a real human. They just take like an actual person, and she, I guess, like gives her image to some company that's just using it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it hurts because I'm spending this time to produce, to connect with my audience, and the AI does not.
Right.
And they're getting so much views, which is why I'm really happy that YouTube is cutting down on the AI slot.
Yes.
Because if anyone should be compensated, it should be the humans that are actually working.
Right. Although to challenge that a little bit, like, shouldn't it be up to the viewers to decide, like, if they want to watch? Because AI is getting so good. Like, what's the role of the platform? What's the role of the platform? And is it their responsibility to protect jobs that are being disrupted by AI? I think it's a tough conversation that no one has the answer to right now.
Right.
I just know that bad AI is recognizable and people don't support it and they don't like it. Because it's a little bit of an uncanny valley.
Yeah.
But once it gets really good and it does free up the presenter, that budget in the production might go to a writer. But if the writer is replaced by ChatGPT, then maybe that cash gets freed up to markets like video.
Yeah.
Right? It's all about like resources. Where does that resource get put if it's taken from or saved from somewhere?
Right.
Yeah. And then what's the role of the government to keep that person who used to be a TV presenter and engaged in a birth society who still has enough resources and enough of a safety net to feed her family?
Girl, these are all questions that I think about every night. Does it not scare you? Or do you feel a little bit of paranoia for your kids?
I mean, it does, but also, I'm gonna be real. I have a 2-year-old and a 10-month-old. I'm just living in power. I'm just trying to like make sure they get fed and that I have my mental health intact for me to show up to work, the next day. So these are like great questions, but you can call me when you have an answer.
That's so real. Crystal, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
your time. I love you so much.
I love you. Oh, you smelled it too.
Oh, thank you.